If you want to remove the fear so that this isn't holding you back anymore, I think it's really fair to say in this episode that a part of that is helping you be real with where your circle's at in their levels of vulnerability, because that's either contributing or preventing you from moving forward and progressing in this arena.
I have so much more respect for myself now because I actually had the courage and the vulnerability to ask myself those really hard and painful questions. And then even more vulnerability doing the really hard thing, leaving situations that were not serving me. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And it is Emilia.
Welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we are helping growth-minded humans evolve by breaking one limiting belief at a time. We hope you enjoyed the last episode, number 267, Motivation Monday, 3 Ways to Make Friends. For today, 268, This Fear is Holding You Back. I had a client a couple of weeks ago. I adore her. She's one of my favorite clients. I'm just going to say it.
You have favorites?
Of course I have favorites. Listen. You know you have favorites too. Don't come at me.
Don't tell my favorite that. Or my favorites that.
Yeah. But we were in a session, and she's an older woman. Has a couple of kids. She's a leader in the organization that she's working in, and she's just crushing it, but is also feeling crushed by it. She's having a lot of difficulty managing everything going on. And one of the biggest challenges that she's finding herself facing right now is the fact that she's the only female leader among all men in the organization, and a lot of them are very ethnically diverse. So women in those positions don't really exist, and she's kind of taken for granted a little bit. And she's been asked, and we've been having dialogues about leadership and leadership qualities and effective communication and all of these different things. And what I had suggested to her was that we started a little book club, because she's super growth oriented and she's like, I want to learn all this stuff. So I'm like, perfect. And no means am I an expert on leadership, but there's a phenomenal book that I would recommend, and we're going to read it together. And it's called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. One of the biggest things that Brené talks about in that book, and what we're going to be talking about today, is vulnerability, and how in leadership and in all types of relationships, vulnerability is hands down the most important factor, element, and skill. And yet it is hands down the most feared thing on the planet. And I know that you and I have definitely struggled with this in the past, and I still struggle with it, and I know you do too. And there's just so many of us who are absolutely terrified of being vulnerable because of the messages we heard around vulnerability, the experiences that we've had, or just what we've seen happen to other people. So what we're going to be diving into today, this is holding you back. The fear of this is holding you back, is the fear of vulnerability.
You know what? For this dialogue, I really want to make sure I had one of my favorite quotes, because it's definitely helped me lean more into vulnerability. And I also have another image that I'm going to read here that I use often in my coaching when I talk about this, because defining it is going to be really helpful, but not just in the definition for definition's sake, but really to help us understand, like, where does this come from? Where does it come up, and what's involved with it? Because I was someone who came from a background where vulnerability equaled weakness. Like, that was the formula. Vulnerability equals weakness, not the formula that I have to remind myself of now, today, and also the formula that I'm helping to instill within so many people, which is vulnerability is not weakness. It's quite opposite. Vulnerability equals strength. It is the strongest thing. It is the strongest skill set that you can exhibit because of the fact that it really takes so much courage. It requires so much courage. So I'm going to read that. And it actually, ironically, comes from who other than her very dang self, Miss Brene Brown. So vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And I dramatically read that because it is very, very true. What it feels like, what it is, and what it isn't is all in between that. And all of us know we've experienced it to some degree because we have what's called you can refer to it as an emotional hangover or vulnerability hangover. Really, what's happening is when you're navigating through the fear of uncertainty, the fear and emotional exposure that is accompanying a courageous moment. That's what's happening. You're getting vulnerable because you're showing and exposing this part of yourself that, like, to another person who can reject you, like we talked about in our last episode, who can reject you, who can make a meaning out of what you're exposing in this deep part of yourself. And like, whether it's good, the outcome's good or not, that exposure component and it takes such an emotional toll on us because it requires a different level of emotional, I would just say, capacity, because you expose yourself, there's courage involved, and that takes, I think of it kind of like it's funny because like I'm thinking about my phone, and if I had like a ton of tabs open, it would drain my battery a lot more. Courage is like having a ton of tabs open on your phone. It's going to drain your battery a lot quicker. But from a social capacity, when you have courage and you exhibit vulnerability, it drains your energy a lot faster. That's why, regardless of the outcome, it still has us feeling like we have a emotional hangover because we've exposed that deep part of ourselves to another person.
You guys, let's call a spade a spade. Vulnerability is terrifying. It really is. Yes, it is absolutely courageous. Yes, it is so essential. And it is terrifying. It is terrifying when you put yourself out on the line and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how the person's going to respond. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. And honestly, a lot of us do have experiences from our past where we made an attempt, we put ourselves out there, we were vulnerable, and we got our asses handed to us. Vulnerability is scary. And yet, it is the only thing that is going to allow you to have whatever you want in life. But working through that fear of it is so critical. I mean, one of the biggest fears that I've faced for a really long time is the fear of being alone. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified that nobody was ever going to love me, that I was always going to be the one that people just used and abused and didn't care about. And because of that, I made a lot of really bad choices in relationships, and I wasn't vulnerable. I didn't express my needs. I didn't express what I wanted. I didn't express, the pain and the hurt that was happening to me because I was so terrified of being vulnerable and them leaving. So it was easier for me to not be vulnerable and be hurt because, well, at least they stay. At least they're not going anywhere. At least, I can have this idea and image in my mind that I'm in a relationship, and, that matters more than me actually being in a good relationship. And vulnerability and courage for me really looked like asking myself the question, is this really what you want? is this really what's right for you? Do you really think that little of yourself, that you're allowing people to just give you below the bare minimum, but you're glorifying them and putting them on a pedestal for what? And it took me having that really vulnerable conversation with myself to realize, my God, I'm allowing these cycles to perpetuate over and over again. I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again because I'm terrified of asking for my needs and being rejected, or asking for my needs and them not being met when the person promises that they're going to, or having to realize that this person is not right for me and then me being alone. And all three of those have happened. It's terrifying. And yet I have so much more respect for myself now because I actually had the courage and the vulnerability to ask myself those really, really hard and painful questions. And then even more vulnerability doing the really hard thing, which was leaving situations that were not serving me.
I have in mind right now a personal experience of mine where there's someone that I don't personally know her. She's connected. She's a relative, distant relative. I don't really know, but she recently published a book, and her book was really about uncovering what it's like to live with an alcoholic parent and the trauma she experienced. And that level of according to some of the members of my family who have read that book, it has been quite an eye-opener to them about how much happened to her, what happened to her, the trauma she experienced, the depth of her experience was really articulated in a book. So when you talk about vulnerability, like, I mean, hats off to everyone that's ever put their heart into their work and ever really exposed the deeper, more vulnerable parts of them on a public forum like a book, because you can't just go out into the world and grab the copies of those books off people's shelves, right? But I'm thinking about her because of the fact that, like, the amount of courage that it has taken her to get to the level of acceptance of what she is and who she is and what she's gone through, to be able to publish that in a book in efforts to help other people is just wild to me. And moreover, what happens in the aftermath when you're that level of vulnerable in efforts to help someone else, what people's reaction end up being to that, right? So it's just, I mean, the conversation, calling it spade to spade, it is one of the more difficult things ever. And I, like, be real, one of the things as I am writing my own book has been really difficult for me has been also acknowledging some of the things that have happened to me, not necessarily for me to vent it to the world, but more so to help express what had happened in efforts to help prevent and control the outcomes for other people so that they don't have to go through things that I have been through, that very few people, even within my family and with my family systems, are aware of. And part of that is the concern about breaking up the family system and the family units, because the things that I am writing about have to do with things that are connected to people that are not comfortable being vulnerable, are not comfortable with sharing things behind the scenes, are not comfortable with vulnerability, and who do not have the formula that vulnerability is strength, but instead have the formula built within them that vulnerability is a weakness.
Hi, my name is Kayleigh Putnam, and I'm an intern at Evolve Ventures Tech, and I work with data analytics. I just wanted to come on here and talk about my experience with the Evolve team. Every single day, I learn new skills, not only my position, but also how to become the best and most aligned version of myself. I've learned through their support that I can achieve any goal I set my mind to, and anything that I want to happen will happen if I work hard enough. I've never met a group of more supportive and genuine people than at Evolve. Every single day, members check in on other members, asking if they're okay, what they can do to help, and it's such a caring environment. And I'm so grateful I got the opportunity to work with this team, because I feel like they've truly given me what I need to be successful in my future careers, and I'm so grateful for that.
And so why I mention that is because I want to bring this into this dialogue around, we end up being just like the adage of we are the sum average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. I want everyone to really think about this, B. And I know you and I have definitely worked on our vulnerability because of the inputs that we've taken, the books that we've read, even you reading that book again, Dare to Lead with that client, right? That's been an input into your consciousness to help you tune up on your vulnerability and work on your courage. But I want all of us thinking about, including, our listeners, around how we end up being very much the average level of vulnerability of those that are in our circle. So every single person that is close to you, the top 5 people, 0 to 10, where is their level of vulnerability? Because if you're someone that wants to work on this, and if you want to remove the fear so that this isn't holding you back anymore, I think it's really fair to say in this episode that a part of that is helping you be real with where your circle's at in their levels of vulnerability. Yeah, because that's either contributing or preventing you from moving forward and progressing in this arena.
I fully agree. I mean, if no one around you is being vulnerable, why would you? You're not going to risk that. You're not going to risk judgment or isolation or being shunned from the group or anything like that. I mean, I remember when we first started the podcast, I was really going through it with my family because COVID had just happened and I had just gotten into that relationship and I ended up having to leave, and tensions were so high in my family. And now, granted, in reflection, I didn't do this the best that I could have. So I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that, but I really spoke out about all of the wrongdoings of my family culture, and just how backwards some of the beliefs were and some of the cultural values and the things that were happening. And I got so attacked. I got attacked up and down. I was shamed and berated. And also, I had so many people that I never in my life thought would reach out to me, DM me, and say, "Thank you so much for saying what you did. Thank you for talking about this stuff that nobody wants to talk about because it's terrifying. Like, you're making me feel so seen, or I feel so seen because you're saying all of this stuff." When you put yourself into the arena, I mean, we're doing it here on this podcast. Every time we show up with a client, every time, you with Alan, with your intimate partner, and me with my friendships, whenever we put ourselves out into the arena, there are going to be instances where we are attacked, where we are, ridiculed or shamed or blamed or guilted or whatever. And that comes with the territory. And also, you're going to get so much love, either from yourself or from the people who are benefiting from your vulnerability and from your courage. If you and I didn't have the courage and the vulnerability to come here and record every single week, we're at what episode number is this? 260 something?
268.
268 times that we have sat in front of these cameras and spoke our truth and made messy action. And sometimes we said things that we probably shouldn't have. And sometimes we made mistakes. And sometimes, whatever. Or every time that we've talked to a client, or every time we did an Out of the Mud event, or every time we've done an IG Live, we are in the arena. We are putting our hearts out there. We are being so vulnerable. because we're exposing ourselves to the world and we're leaving a really big opportunity for people to attack us. And they have. How many
Oh,
times
yeah.
have we been told that Evolve is a cult, or that Evolve is this, or Evolve is
Oh
that,
my God.
or that we're manipulating people? And if you want a real therapist, go find a real therapist. Like,
Or better
we've
yet,
had,
like that didn't actually happen, or you got the story wrong, or this and that because someone
yeah,
felt personally exposed. It's been wild the amount of like hate and distortion and delusion that we have gotten because we actually like are like leaning into the strength of vulnerability. And guys, here's the truth of that, be like, you like, as you lean into it, I think that that's why it's so scary, be because truth is, when you lean into this vulnerability thing, you will get socially ostracized by certain people that do not know how to value it.
100%.
Yeah, but we will. That's the reality. Like, there are, like, from you and even our families, like, as much as they want to support, it's like sometimes they just don't know how. From our friends, as much as they want to support, they just don't know how, right? So that's the hard truth around why we even have more fear, is because for every 10 people that we have impacted in a deeply meaningful, life-changing way, saved someone's life from domestic abuse, from violence, from overdosing, from suicide, from, like, the list could go on and on about how many people we have improved their lives, saved their lives. But for every 10 people, there's one person that attacks because of our level of vulnerability. And our brain remembers at least 2.5 times harder that one person that was a hater, that was a doubter, that doesn't believe in vulnerability, regardless of how many people we've helped, we've served, whatever, right? And that's the thing. Our brains remember that because it's painful.
And it's easy to not take action as a result of that. I mean, it would have been so easy for me to stop doing this because of what was happening within my family, because of the impact it was having on my relationship at the time, because of, you know, all of the hate that we've gotten on social media, or people just having no idea what we're doing and
Yeah.
saying that we're full of it or we're hurting people or whatever. It would have been so easy. And if we want to be honest, I have wanted to quit. I have, with all of the hate and with all of the like negativity and the harm that has come our way from doing this mission. There have been so many times where I've just been like, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
What's the point? Like, we're like, nobody gets it. And then I get a message from somebody and it's like, you're changing my life. Or because of you, I'm now able to do X, Y, and Z. Or I'll get on the phone with a client and they're like, Bianca, you are the best therapist I've ever worked with. I've seen 20 therapists and none of them have been able to help me the way that you have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you remember that and it keeps you going, because you start to understand that, yes, hate is going to come. Yes, people are not going to understand. Yes, being vulnerable, it can and probably will hurt you. And it is also going to bring you so much beauty and so much love and so much abundance. And you have no idea what benefits are going to come as a result of it. But you have to be willing to work through that fear of allowing that pain to come and showing yourself that you're capable of handling it when it does.
Facts. Hate and protecting yourself is a lot easier than vulnerability. And that's the thing. That's why, you know, the fear of leaning into this stuff really is, to wrap this episode, holding us back. And I know that I have unlocked parts of myself that I never really thought I could get to, because I didn't recognize the strength that is in vulnerability, right? And also observing other people that have helped to open up vulnerability. Like, I remember when I first met Brene's work, it's like it opened a whole new world to me. And likewise, so many other people who have stood on the shoulders of the giants, who have understood the value in this. And living in a world without kindness, without vulnerability, without breaking through these fears is not a world that I want to be a part of, you know? So I'm just grateful that we're contributing to the solution rather than the problems that really do infiltrate our world in a way. And I know that for so many of our community and our listeners, I've even heard this directly from clients and people within the community, that like this dialogue, having that is what helps people see what they're really capable of and unlocking parts of them that they never thought existed and never believed that they could actually access. And therefore, as a result of that feeling of inaccessibility, uncontrollability, never thought that they could have these levels of meaning, of joy, and of fulfillment that they're now experiencing because they're leaning into their courage. They're learning how to find their voice. They're understanding who they are at a deeper level without having to bend and mold and morph and shrink and dim their own light just to make other people comfortable. So I'm grateful that we are pioneering that charge on top of those pioneers who have come before us. And I'm grateful that we have cultivated and recultivated the courage to lean into these freaking mics every single week for 268 episodes straight. And get this, y'all, we're just getting started. Things are just starting to get started. So much more to come here. That is pretty much my final takeaway. I don't know if you have anything more to add on this episode, or do you want me to go into final suggestions episodes?
I'll just say this. Vulnerability is scary and it is hard. But what are you missing out by not learning how to lean into it?
Life. Everything. Literally everything.
Yeah.
So
everything.
Episode suggestion for this one for my friends in the back is actually a Motivation Monday. 239. Let's keep it real. The way to show up as your best self in any room. And I believe that showing up as your best self, it is connected to this vulnerability thing and leaning into the fear of that. So I'll leave on that. B, what's yours?
Facts. 208. What are limiting beliefs and how do we stop them?
So important.
If vulnerability and the fear of it is holding you back, if you know that your life is being limited by your fear of being vulnerable, of being courageous, of, putting yourself out on the line, reach out to Emilia and I. We have so many programs and so many things to offer you here at Evolve that can help you to work through that. One of which is the brand new program that we just launched called the You Do You program. It is an online subscription-based therapy and coaching model, and it really meets you where you are. So if you're not ready yet to do weekly calls or bi-weekly calls, if you're not ready to have that level of accountability yet, that's totally okay. This program is going to meet you where you are, and it's a really safe and really affordable way to get the journey started. So if that's something that you're interested in, get in our DMs or go to evolveventurestech.com/therapy to get some more information. All right, everybody, have a beautiful weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.